Hey guys, welcome to Journey of Relaxation. Tonight, we're venturing into the middle of nowhere, literally. You're standing in the middle of the Mongolian steppe, where the grass never ends and the sky feels like it might just swallow you whole. There's no city glow here, no highways humming in the background, just wine stars and something faintly spicy riding on the air, juniper smoke curling from the roof hole of a round felt tent that isn't just a home, it's a monastery. You step inside. Bells jingle softly as the door flap sways. The air is warm, almost too warm and thick with incense. It smells like old cloth butter lamps and 100 whispered prayers. Everything glows gold and red, from the brocade wall hangings to the robes of the women moving through the space with slow, practiced grace. This is no stone abbey tucked in a mountain pass. It's a yurt, portable, practical, and entirely sacred. And the women inside, Mongol nuns. You probably won't survive this lifestyle. No offense, but the wind alone could slap the smug out of you in 10 seconds flat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not entirely sure how you got here, to be honest. One moment you were trailing behind a caravan hauling felt barley and prayer flags, and the next you're seated cross-legged on a sheepskin rug in front of a nun who looks like she's been meditating since Genghis Khan was in diapers. Her face is creased like old parchment, but her eyes are sharp. She doesn't speak much, not at first. Instead, she gestures toward the butter lamp, the bowl of dried cheese curds, the simple altar adorned with a tiny Buddha, a carved horse figurine, and something that looks suspiciously like a horse tooth. The wind pushes through the tent seams like a gossip trying to sneak into the conversation. You learn quickly that life here is rhythm, not rules. The temple tent sways slightly when the wind is strong enough, yet inside the nuns chant like the earth itself is holding them steady. Their voices are low and droning like bees inside a wine bottle. There are no pews, just mats. No pew hymnals, just memory. You're given a small, oily bowl of salty milk tea. It tastes like warm seawater with a hint of goat, and apparently that's a compliment. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind: by the 13th century, Buddhism had already spread deeply into Mongol culture, thanks to imperial support and Silk Road monks swapping tales and scriptures from Tibet to the Russian forests. These women, they're the inheritors of that strange fusion, half nomad, half nun, fully unreadable to the outside world. Someone rings a bell, not aggressively, just once, a soft ding. It's time to pray again. You're handed a string of beads, slippery and worn. One of the younger nuns, maybe only 15, smiles and shows you how to flick through them with your thumb. One bead per syllable, one syllable per breath. You get dizzy trying. Later, you follow them outside. The wind claws at your robes and your cheeks sting like you've been slapped with frozen noodles. But they walk barefoot. Not out of suffering or aesthetic, just habit. The earth is holy too, someone mutters. One nun, much older than the rest, is said to be over 90. No one's sure. She hums to herself while tending a small bundle of juniper branches. She burns them slowly, deliberately. Smoke curls up, catching the moonlight like silver thread. She waves it in ritual arcs around the perimeter of the camp. A protective rite. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night: that smoke isn't just symbolic, it's practical. Juniper is antimicrobial, and Mongol nuns believed it could ward off disease, evil spirits, and even the occasional rat infestation. Triple threat. Historians still argue whether these early steppe nunneries were officially sanctioned religious institutions or grassroots gatherings of spiritually inclined women who were, in modern terms, over it. The warfare, the marriages, the endless relocation. But what's certain is that the Buddhist practices here are laced with Mongol salt. Horses matter more than scrolls. Smoke matters more than ink. And silence, that rare bird, flaps gently through every corner of your experience. As the evening deepens, the nuns return inside, layering the walls with thick yak wool to hold in the heat. Someone offers you a second bowl of tea. You accept because your fingers feel like little wooden sticks. A final chant. This one sounds more melodic, and some nuns close their eyes and sway slightly. No candles, just the butter lamp's glow flickering like a heartbeat. Eventually, you curl up under 3 layers of wool and canvas. Outside, the steppe stretches on forever. No walls, no cities. Just wind, sky, and the low murmur of women whose lives hum to a rhythm older than memory. You wake to a sound you can't quite place. It's not a bell this time or the wind yanking at the tent flaps. It's softer, more domestic. A rhythmic slosh-slosh from outside. Someone's churning butter with a kind of peaceful vengeance. You rub your eyes and sit up. Around you the yurt is alive. A few nuns are already moving about, folding bedrolls, rekindling the fire, and reciting morning prayers that blend perfectly with the kettles bubbling and the creak of hide boots. No alarm clocks here. The sun and the smoke do the job just fine. By now you're starting to realize this isn't a monastery in the traditional sense. There are no stone cloisters or iron bells. No fortress walls or Latin chants echoing through carved archways. Instead, it's a nomadic sanctuary, fluid, quiet, and very much alive. You ask quietly with a hesitant gesture how someone even becomes a nun out here. One of the middle-aged women busy kneading dough that smells faintly of goat and flour chuckles. Her teeth are stained from years of tea and tobacco, but her smile is bright. She says something in Mongolian that roughly translates to, "You fall off enough horses, you find peace in walking." Later over breakfast, which involves more salty milk tea and something chewy that might once have been cheese, you sit with her and listen. She speaks softly sometimes, pausing for long stretches as if waiting for the wind to confirm her memories. She tells you how girls become nuns here. Sometimes they're the youngest daughter expected to avoid marriage and devote themselves to spirit and service. Sometimes they're orphaned by war or disease and taken in by temple communities. And sometimes they just show up. Tired of court life, tired of husbands, tired of chasing yaks across the horizon. One joined after dreaming the Buddha rode by on a golden horse and told her to stop shouting at her husband. Fair enough. There's no grand ceremony, no tonsure with singing and robes. Instead, a girl gradually sheds the outer world. First she cuts her hair, or lets the wind do it over time. Then she gives away her jewelry. Finally, she learns the chants not from scrolls, but by listening over and over until the syllables soak into her bones. And just like that, she's one of them. You're surprised to learn that many of the nuns were once warriors, or at least warriors' daughters. Some of them rode into battle with their clans wearing men's robes and wielding bows longer than their legs. The Mongol Empire didn't always separate the sacred and the savage. A woman could be both fierce and holy sometimes in the same week. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the Yuan dynasty, Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, was heavily patronized by the Mongol elite. But among commoners and rural communities, religious practice was shaped by survival tradition and intuition more than doctrine. That meant a nun on the steppe could meditate under the stars one day and help deliver a calf the next. And here's your offbeat nugget. There's an old belief among some steppe communities that a nun who had once wielded a bow had stronger prayers because her soul had been tempered by tension. Literally. The more taut your past, the more potent your chants. Historians still argue whether these nuns considered themselves part of a larger religious order, or were simply self-sufficient circles of women grounded in local practice. There's very little written evidence after all, only oral traditions, scattered artifacts, and the occasional Chinese scholars' confused notes on wandering female monks with ox-hair prayer wheels. You help one nun haul water from a nearby stream, icy ankle-deep and nearly invisible in the morning frost. She walks with such casual grace across the uneven ground that you nearly tumble twice just keeping up. You ask what drew her to this life. She doesn't answer right away. Then finally, "I wanted silence that didn't punish me." That sentence follows you all day. Back at camp, you sit with the younger girls learning the mantras. They chant in rhythm with their breath, and the elder nun leads them with a voice that's more rasp than sound. You try to join in, but your pronunciation turns one sacred phrase into something that makes the others giggle. The laughter, though, isn't mocking, it's warm. You're part of the group now. Well, sort of. They still won't let you touch the butter statue on the altar. You've got to earn that. You also learn about the invisible threshold between ordinary life and nunhood. You can still help cook, still laugh, still collect dung for fuel. You can even keep your old name if you want. But once you chant at moonrise 3 nights in a row without faltering, you're in. Whether you meant to be or not. At dusk, someone pulls out a worn drum made of stretched hide. It thuds like a heartbeat under the open sky, and the chanting begins again, slow, deep, repetitive. You sit nearby, wrapped in a woolen robe, and feel the sound move through the grass beneath you. No vows were spoken, no scroll signed, but still something in you shifts. By the time the sun has swung overhead and started its gentle lean toward the western hills, you've wandered deeper into camp, if you can call a circular cluster of mobile homes a camp. What you're about to step into isn't just a yurt. It's a yurt monastery. And yes, that's a thing. From the outside, it looks like all the others round low to the ground, wrapped in layers of felt and leather smoke, curling lazily from the roof hole like a sleepy dragon stretching in its den. But inside, it's another world entirely. When you duck through the flap, you're greeted by the scent of juniper, the muffled hum of prayer, and a warmth that feels like it's been earned, not just lit. Everything in here is arranged just so. The thick felt walls are layered with tapestries, Thanka's vivid paintings on cloth that show the Buddha in various forms, often surrounded by lion's flames or a suspicious number of tiny clouds. One shows him riding a snow lion that looks suspiciously like a very fluffy goat. You try not to smirk. The floor is covered in wool mats, worn but clean. The center of the space is reserved for an altar, simple, sacred, and surprisingly colorful. Offerings of dried milk curds, tiny clay sculptures, and butter lamps flicker gently in brass bowls. A few dried herbs are arranged in a circle around what appears to be a small bronze bell wrapped in a red sash. There are no pews, no gilded icons, no doors or stone arches. Yet the space is undeniably holy and practical because the roof lifts off for airflow, and you can pack the whole thing onto 3 camels in under a day if you really have to. Try doing that with a Gothic cathedral. You catch a nun adjusting a small tapestry with the care of someone brushing the hair of an elderly relative. Every item here has a place of memory. That string of beads carried by a grandmother across the Gobi. That altar cloth dyed with onion skin and worn for 5 winters before it was deemed worthy to drape over Buddha's lap. Here's your mainstream fact for the day. Mongolian Buddhism was largely influenced by Tibetan Vajrayana traditions, but localized into a nomadic structure that allowed for portable sacred spaces. That meant monks and nuns, especially in rural areas, had to adapt rituals and spaces to fit a life on the move. So yes, temples on horseback weren't just poetic metaphors. They were logistical masterpieces. And here's your deliciously quirky tidbit. Some yurt monasteries had secret compartments sewn into the walls for hiding scrolls, charms, and once reportedly a squirrel that stole food offerings but was believed to be a reincarnated monk. The squirrel stayed. It had its own prayer beads. The yurt's layout subtly teaches you how to behave. You move clockwise around the altar just like the sun. You lower your head as you pass certain images. You never point your feet at the sacred paintings unless you want a gentle smack with a felt slipper. There's a deliberate choreography to everything. A nun taps a small drum barely audible over the wind whistling through the smoke hole. The rhythm isn't about music. It's about keeping the pace of breath, of chant, of mind. And when you look up the oldest nun, yes, the one who might be 90, might be 200, has taken her place by the altar. She lights another butter lamp. No match. Just flint spark and a lot of patience. The lamp flares to life with the smell of burnt milk and a flicker that casts golden shadows across the wall. Historians still argue whether these temple yurts were considered fully sanctioned temples or just religious stations along pilgrimage routes. What's clear, though, is that they served not only as places of worship, but also as community hub schools, herbal clinics, libraries, even crisis centers for wandering herders looking for a place to cry, pray, or trade milk for advice. You're handed a small metal bowl. It's heavy with barley flour sampa mixed with butter and rolled into dense little lumps. Not exactly dessert, but the nuns eat it with reverence. You copy them, unsure what the spiritual etiquette is for chewing. A young nun leans over and whispers, "We make the best ones during thunderstorms." Extra electricity in the air. You don't know if she's joking. But later she shows you a tiny horse figurine carved from butter and explains it was made during a storm in August, and that it's a lucky one. Apparently this nun has a side hustle in sacred dairy sculpting. By mid-afternoon the yurt is warm and quiet. The light has gone soft and gold. Some nuns doze with their backs against the wall. Others stitch prayer flags, mumbling mantras under their breath. And in that lull, you feel it, the peace isn't just in the silence. It's in the ritual, in the worn rugs and careful placement of sacred things. In the way the space wraps around you, not like a cathedral reaching for heaven, but like a mother tucking you in. Outside, the wind picks up again, tugging at the flap. But in here, wrapped in the scent of butter lamps and wool, you feel like you could stay a while. You're starting to notice the rhythm now, not just of the chants, but of everything. It's not a rigid schedule written in ink. It's more like a dance, unspoken and deeply felt. At dawn, you wake to the low murmur of prayer. Not all the nuns are awake yet, just a few whispering syllables in time with their beads. One gently taps a small wooden bell. Another stirs a pot of barley porridge with half-closed eyes already half in meditation. You step out into the crisp morning air. It bites at your nose and makes your breath puff like a kettle on a low flame. Around the camp, the other yurts are slowly coming to life. Some smoke curls upward. Somewhere a yak groans. A nun squints toward the eastern hills and murmurs something that might be a blessing or a weather report. The day begins with chores, not ceremonies. The altar must be dusted, the butter lamps trimmed. Dung collected for fuel. You learn quickly not to step barefoot where the sacred cows have been sacredly pooping. A few nuns clean the copper bowls used for offerings, scrubbing them with sand and goat hair brushes. You help, of course. You're handed a broom made of bundled reeds and told to sweep the temple yurt clockwise. Only clockwise. You're warned twice. At breakfast, the nuns eat slowly and without much talk. The tea is thick and salty again, yak butter mostly melted into boiled milk. It coats your mouth and your soul in equal measure. You chew through a lump of tsampa and manage not to choke. Progress. After breakfast, the chanting begins in earnest. Not the soft private hums of the early morning, but full-voiced communal mantras that rise and fall like breathing hills. The lead nun, the one with the forever cracked knuckles and fierce eyebrows, starts the call. The others answer. The yurt becomes an instrument. This goes on for hours. Not in one sitting, but in intervals punctuated by chores, tea breaks, and the occasional need to herd a goat back from chewing on the sacred laundry. You wonder how they do it day after day, the same rhythm, the same cycle of prayer and practice. But slowly, the appeal becomes clear. There's something soothing about the repetition. The world doesn't ask anything clever of you here. Only presence. Only patience. You see a younger nun quietly correcting another's hand position during meditation. There's no scolding. Just a light touch, a redirection. Even mistakes are folded into the rhythm. Mainstream historical fact, Buddhist monastic routines, whether in Tibetan Chinese or Mongolian traditions, emphasize the steady pulse of daily discipline, meditation, prayer, chores, and study. In nomadic Mongol nunneries, these elements had to be flexible, but the core remained chant, clean, care, repeat. And now for the quirky detail, one of the oldest nuns wears a pair of mismatched felt boots. Not because she's eccentric, but because she insists that one belonged to a former nun who always tripped during prayers, and she needed steadier feet in the afterlife. So this nun wears one of her boots every day in her honor, the other boot hanging near the altar like a relic. Historians still argue whether these daily rhythms were formally documented or passed along solely through oral tradition and observation. Some accounts suggest that while male monasteries kept scrolls and daily schedules, female communities relied more on memory, intuition, and ancestral mimicry. We do it because the one before did, a nun tells you. That's all the explanation they need. After mid-morning prayers, it's lesson time. Not reading from scripture necessarily, many of the nuns can't read in the classical sense. Instead, lessons come in the form of stories. One nun sits in the center of the yurt, surrounded by younger girls, and tells tales of the Buddha disguised as a beggar or a fox who tricked a demon into becoming a nun. The fox story is suspiciously detailed, and you suspect it may be autobiographical. In the afternoon, everyone works. A few nuns stitch robes. One weaves coarse thread into new prayer flags. Another is making tiny clay stupas, each the size of your thumb, then setting them out to dry in the sun. You ask why. She shrugs. Just in case, she says. You're not sure what that means. You don't ask. Someone sneezes during meditation. No one reacts. A chicken briefly wanders through the yurt. No one blinks. You trip over a prayer mat and knock over a brass bowl. Every head turns. Silence. Then the oldest nun cracks a smile and mutters something that sends the room into quiet giggles. You're off the hook. Later, during tea, one nun tells you that the steps of the day are sacred, not because they're perfect, but because they're constant. Even the wind takes breaks, she says. We don't. You lie on your back outside the yurt as the sun leans lower, the chants echoing faintly behind you, and for the first time in a long while you feel time as something soft. Not rushing, not dragging, just drifting. At this point, you've been with the nuns long enough that your body has started to hum with their rhythm. You sleep when they sleep, eat what they eat, and chant even badly when they chant. But today you notice something shift. You're sitting with a few of the younger nuns helping grind juniper branches into incense powder. When one of them leans over and grins, the Buddha rides a pony too. You blink. You must have misheard. But then they all start nodding like that's the most obvious fact in the world. One even imitates a horse trot, her prayer beads clacking in time with the rhythm. It's not a joke. Out here in the steppe, everything bends to the horse, including the divine. The Buddha in local legend doesn't just float on lotus petals or meditate under fig trees. No, he shows up covered in dust, riding a shaggy Mongol pony, maybe even with a small crack in his sandal. Enlightened, yes, but sensible about transport. You laugh a little too loud, but then you realize how deeply real this imagery is to them. The horse is sacred, not just an animal but a bridge, between places, between lives, between you and the divine. Mainstream historical fact time. As Buddhism spread across Central Asia and took root in Mongol culture, many of its traditional Indian and Tibetan stories were localized. That often meant adapting spiritual symbols to fit the landscape. Mountains became steppes, rivers became snowmelt streams, and of course the Buddha didn't walk, he rode. You watch as a nun unrolls a painted scroll showing the historical Buddha with what appears to be reins in one hand. The pony beside him is decorated with yak bone charms, and what might be dyed felt saddlebags. You can't tell if it's deeply sacred or just deeply adorable. Then comes the quirky twist apparently in one small nunnery's oral tradition, the Buddha's horse. Yes, the actual horse is said to have reincarnated hundreds of times, and now wanders the steppe alone. If a wild pony ever stops and makes eye contact with you without flinching, you're supposed to offer it tea and ask it for a mantra. Someone says that happened to a nun once. She still walks like she's part horse. You decide not to press for details. After morning meditation, you're invited to help with one of the more unusual rituals blessing the horses. Not with incense or water, but with chanting and wait for it rubbing their ears. Apparently, horses store spiritual tension in their ears. One nun explains this while trying to wrangle a very unimpressed mare, who clearly has opinions about being spiritually detoxed. You get to help holding a bowl of sacred barley as another nun chants something that sounds like a lullaby. The horse blinks slowly, then sneezes. You're told that means she approves. Later, while sipping yet more salty tea at this point, your blood is probably 20% yak butter. You overhear a debate between two nuns about whether the historical Buddha ever saw snow. One insists he did during a vision. The other snorts and says, only when he visited us in a dream last winter. Historians still argue whether these kinds of localized myths were recognized beyond the communities that created them. Some claim they were merely metaphors, tools to help isolated nomads relate to distant spiritual teachings. Others believe these variations were fully integrated into regional practices with entire lineages of oral lore built around them. What's certain is this: on the steppe, the divine must travel. There are no temples carved into stone cliffs or monasteries anchored to mountainsides. Everything here moves: the camp, the yurt, the wind, even the Buddha. At dusk you join a procession, not a grand one, but a quiet walk around the monastery yurt. Each nun circles 3 times, whispering their mantra with every step. They walk clockwise, always clockwise. Even the chickens follow suit. And here's another thing: the nuns believe that movement keeps prayers fresh. If you chant while riding, your words ride farther. If you chant while walking, your feet press your wishes into the ground. If you chant while sleeping, yes, some of them, do you carry those wishes into the next life? Sleep talking for karma. That night, as you curl beneath your now beloved pile of yak wool blankets, you hear hoofbeats outside. Just one horse, quiet, passing by. You don't open the flap, because what if it's that horse? You're beginning to feel like a proper steppe monastic now, at least until the temperature drops. You wake to find frost hugging the edges of the yurt flap like it's trying to sneak in. Your breath puffs in front of your face, and your fingertips feel like someone swapped them with popsicle sticks while you slept. The inside of the butter lamp has frozen. How does that even happen? Across the room, a nun is already up, humming quietly while layering on what looks like a robe over another robe. She looks like a stack of laundry with prayer beads. The cold is a character out here. It doesn't just arrive, it announces itself. And yet the nuns barely flinch. They move slower, sure, but they don't rush. They don't complain. They just layer up, toss more dung on the fire, and get on with their prayers. You try to do the same. You dig into the community wool pile and pull on whatever's not already moving or occupied. Someone tosses you what feels like a pair of boots made from the interior of a yak. You're pretty sure there are still whiskers inside. This brings us to a strange truth you've suspected for days now. There is no such thing as formal robes here. Or rather, there are. but they're entirely functional. The nuns wear the same robes to chant, cook shovel dung, and ride horses. What makes them sacred isn't the thread, but the intent. You notice one nun adjusting her headscarf with precision, tucking it into a tight knot that leaves no hair exposed. The next nun over wears hers loosely with a few gray wisps fluttering like prayer flags in the wind. When you ask about the difference, they shrug. Some shave, some don't. Spirit doesn't care if you're bald. Mainstream historical fact. While head shaving has long been part of Buddhist monastic practice across Asia, Mongol nuns, especially those in isolated steppe communities, often modified or even skipped the ritual. Between sub-zero temperatures and limited access to tools, spiritual discipline sometimes bowed to frostbite. And the quirky detail. One oral tale tells of a nun whose hair grew back after every full moon, no matter how cleanly she shaved. Eventually, she stopped trying. She wore her silver braid as a belt and said, "If the Buddha minds, he'll braid it himself." Historians still argue whether such leniencies in monastic rules were tolerated by broader Buddhist institutions or considered evidence of rural syncretism. Some Tibetan scholars visiting the region in the 18th century wrote with confusion about nuns in woolen cloaks who claimed visions while milking yaks. But practicality isn't just tolerated here, it's sacred. Take the robes, for instance. You learn that many are hand-dyed using natural pigments, onion skins for amber, walnut husks for brown, and crushed beetles for deep reds. And beneath those flowing outer layers, layers upon layers of furs, wools, stitched rags, whatever will keep the wind from sneaking in. One nun even lets you peek beneath her robe to reveal a lining made from recycled saddle padding. Keeps the hips warm, she says with a wink, and the ancestors impressed. You try joining the chants that morning, your voice rasping from cold and half-frozen tea. The nun beside you kindly hands over a strip of dried meat and a scarf you suspect she's had for 3 decades. You wrap it around your neck. Your chant sounds slightly better. Slightly. Later in the day, you witness one of the more intimate rituals, the blessing of winter layers. As the cold sets in, each nun takes her warmest robe or fur wrap and lays it before the altar. They chant softly, asking that their layers carry warmth not just in body but in spirit. That the robe might remember the fire, as one puts it. And they don't bless just their own. They bless extras, in case visitors arrive or a herder loses their way. No one shivers alone on this land if they can help it. The wind howls that night. It whistles through the smoke hole, flutters the thankas, and makes the butter statue on the altar glisten with a soft frost. You huddle beside 2 nuns sharing a blanket and a cracked ceramic bowl of thick stew that tastes like spicy candle wax but warms your bones instantly. Someone mutters a phrase that roughly translates to "the cold purifies the foolish." You all chuckle. It's unclear whether you're laughing at the cold or the foolish. That night, you fall asleep under 5 layers of robes, fur, and humility. Your breath fogs the air. Somewhere nearby, the old nun with the mismatched boots is still chanting, unmoved by wind or ice. She doesn't even shiver. You wonder if she's part snow by now. As you drift off, you realize that the line between spiritual and survival out here is thin as a thread, and twice as strong. You wake to coughing, not yours. Not exactly sick, but dry and rhythmic, like someone trying to argue with the air. A few of the nuns are gathered around one of the younger girls who's curled on a mat, sweating despite the cold. Someone is heating stones over the fire. Someone else is mashing herbs with a worn wooden pestle. Today, you're not just going to observe prayer. You're going to watch medicine work the old-fashioned way. Out here, without clinics or doctors on horseback, healing falls to the nuns. Not out of obligation, but tradition. Long before Buddhism reached the steppe, the role of female healers was baked into the nomadic lifestyle, spiritual authority, midwifery, and herbalism, all wrapped into one woolen shawl. When Buddhism arrived, it didn't erase those roles. It just gave them more chance. You hover as unobtrusively as possible while an elder nun grinds what looks like dried roots into powder, then scoops it into a bowl of hot water and yak milk. The smell is unusual, like spicy clay and tree bark left out in the rain. The girl takes a sip, grimaces, and is rewarded with a gentle head pat and a murmured mantra. The others sit around her, not watching exactly, just being there, holding the space, letting her illness pass through the air like smoke. One of the nuns sees your curiosity and beckons you over to a side pouch stitched into the yurt wall. She pulls out a small roll of bundled herbs and unwinds it carefully. There's dried juniper, of course, and something that looks like crushed lichen. A piece of marmot fat wrapped in paper. Several mysterious items labeled only by scent and confidence. Here's your mainstream historical moment. Mongol healing practices blended indigenous shamanic methods with Buddhist spiritual rites. Herbal medicine was widely used not just for physical illness, but also for spiritual imbalances, often diagnosed through dreams pulse readings, or believe it or not the appearance of smoke in certain rituals. And here's your delightfully quirky tidbit. In some traditions, a healer nun would sing to the patient's pillow the night before, a treatment warming it with intention. One nun here still does it, though she grumbles that younger pillows don't listen. You're handed a bundle of dried wormwood tied with red string. You're told to wave it clockwise, always clockwise, around the sick girl. You do, and though you feel deeply underqualified, no one stops you. The act isn't about your skill. It's about your presence, your care. Then comes the smoke. A low table is cleared. A bed of herbs laid out. A coal dropped into the center. The herbs catch with a hiss, and suddenly smoke curls into the air in thick, earthy spirals. The nuns begin to chant, not loudly, not in unison. It's more like a conversation with the invisible. The room smells like ancient forests and someone's deeply regretted teacup. The girl seems to calm. Her shoulders relax. The sweat beads disappear from her brow. You'd like to believe it's the medicine, but something tells you it's also the way everyone's gaze remains soft, undemanding. No pressure to recover on a schedule. Just trust in the breath, the warmth, the song of the herbs. Historians still argue whether Mongol nuns were formally trained in these healing techniques, or simply learned through apprenticeship and necessity. Some scrolls recovered from collapsed monasteries mention medicinal rites performed by the women of wind and fire, but it's unclear if they refer to nuns, shamans, or both. Later that day, you're shown the storage yurt. It's smaller, colder, and lined with shelves made of tied sticks. Here lie bundles of herbs, dried animal parts, some labeled, most not, bowls of crushed minerals, and one extremely suspicious bundle labeled "Fox hair, do not touch." You don't touch it. You're also introduced to something you can only describe as smoke dentistry. A nun gestures to a girl complaining about a bad tooth, then prepares a smudge bundle soaked in some fermented paste. She lights it, holds it near the girl's mouth, and chants gently. The girl flinches, then laughs, then doesn't complain again. Was it magic pain tolerance suggestion? You don't know. You also don't ask. As twilight arrives, you help prepare a healing tea made from pine needle's bitter root, and something someone claims is boiled sun. It tastes awful. It works anyway. You end the day back in the temple yurt, helping press tiny herbal pellets into wax paper for later use. The work is meditative. The air still smells of smoke and warmth. You've seen miracles today, not of the lightning strike variety, but of patience, wisdom, and oddly scented smoke that curls around a girl's illness like a lullaby. And as you settle in for sleep, you hear someone whisper from across the room. She's breathing easier now. You don't know if they're talking about the sick girl, or you. The night is so still it feels like the steppe is holding its breath. You open your eyes to the faint flicker of butter lamplight and the soft creak of the yurt's frame shifting with the wind. But the air is warm, heavy with smoke and song, and something tells you this isn't just another night of chants and chilly tea. It's moonlight chanting tonight. You're gently nudged awake by one of the younger nuns who grins like she's about to share a secret. "Come," she whispers. It's the 29th moon. You have no idea what that means, but your body moves before your brain catches up. Outside, the sky is clearer than it has any right to be. Stars drip down the curve of the heavens like spilled salt. A few nuns are already gathered near the outer circle of the monastery yurt, bundled in layered robes and furs. One of them is beating a drum so slowly it feels like the sound is walking barefoot across your ribs. You join them, half asleep, half awake, entirely in awe. Tonight's practice is special. It happens once a lunar cycle when the moon is thin and the air is thick with possibility. The nuns chant under the stars, not for health, not for the ancestors, not even for enlightenment, but for clarity. A clean breath for the soul. A light in the dark before the calendar resets. You sit cross-legged trying to match the rhythm of the breath chanting. It's slower than usual. Softer. More breath than voice. You start to lose track of time. The stars rotate overhead. Your fingers tingle from cold and stillness. The wind lifts your hair and doesn't give it back. Then someone begins the tea. No, not the usual buttery brew. This tea is ceremonial and far stranger. It's a fermented mixture that smells like wet hay and old secrets. It's brewed in a brass pot with carvings so worn they look like ripples instead of script. You're handed a small clay cup. The nun who gives it to you raises an eyebrow like, "Let's see if you're serious." You drink. It tastes like someone boiled a mushroom in a saddlebag. And yet, you feel it. A warmth unfurling in your chest. Not the cozy kind, more like someone slowly lighting a lantern behind your ribs. One nun begins singing. Not chanting singing. A high clear tone that floats above the wind and hovers in the yurt like a flame refusing to go out. Others join in, not in harmony but in layers. The sound stacks like snow on a fence post. You look around and realize they're not looking at the altar tonight. Or the Buddha statues. Or even the sky. They're looking inward. Mainstream historical fact. Mongol Buddhism, especially in isolated communities, often included night rituals linked to lunar cycles. These weren't always part of mainstream Tibetan or Chinese temple practice, but evolved through centuries of nomadic adaptation. Night chanting served psychological and communal roles, especially in winter months, when spiritual disconnection was more common. And the quirky bit. There's an old superstition that if you fall asleep during a moonlight chant, you'll dream of your past lives and wake up with an unexplainable craving. One nun claims she once dreamed she was a Chinese court musician and woke up desperate for pickled plums. They had to trade with a passing merchant for weeks to satisfy her. Historians still argue whether these moonlit rites were ever formally recorded, or whether they were considered fringe practices. One visiting Tibetan monk in the 1600s described such a ritual as pleasant but excessive tea drinking with inappropriate singing. He later admitted it was the most peaceful night I ever had. Back inside the yurt, the chanting dissolves into quiet conversation. The nuns relax into blankets, heads leaning on each other, the fire crackling softly. Someone hums a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. It sounds older than history. A younger nun asks if you want to try leading a chant. Everyone pauses, waits. You choke, laugh, then try. It comes out wobbly, unsure. But they join you, gently, quietly. You realize they're not laughing at you. They're following you. The tea has softened your thoughts. The fire has warmed your bones. And in this moment, wrapped in first stars and song, you understand something. Clarity isn't lightning. It's moonlight, gentle, patient, cold, but kind. You fall asleep just before dawn, cheek against a folded robe, your last thought drifting like steam from the tea bowl beside you. And in your dream, the horse returns. This time it bows. You wake slowly, as if rising through layers of silk and smoke. Outside, the steppe is cloaked in dawn light, soft grays and peach-colored whispers spreading across the horizon. Someone's stirring porridge. Someone else is sweeping dust that probably hasn't moved since Genghis Khan was a teenager. But today feels different. There's a buzz in the air. Not excitement too calm for that. More like a silent current tugging at every sleeve and bootstrap. The older nuns are wrapping bundles in cloth. The younger ones are oiling the wheels of a handcart. One by one, the prayer flags come down. The yurt monastery is moving. Yes, the entire thing. You blink, still holding the edge of your robe like it might stop the ground from tilting. But no one else seems surprised. A nun tosses you a sack and nods. We go where the earth listens. Of course. This is the migration ritual. When the seasons shift and the grazing grows thin, the nuns pack their temple, their teachings, and their tea, and carry them across the steppe like a sacred whisper. You watch as the altar is gently disassembled, each item wrapped in felt and tied with colored string. The butter statue is carefully spooned into a gourd. The thankas are rolled, not folded. Even the tiny, slightly terrifying horse made of clay gets tucked into a pouch and blessed with a quick breath. Mainstream historical fact. Mongol nuns, especially in non-urban communities, practiced what scholars call mobile monasticism, a structure of sacred life that adapted to nomadic needs. Rather than remaining in one fixed temple, many nunneries migrated seasonally with their flocks, or in response to weather, water, and political tensions. Spirituality for them was portable. And now your wonderfully strange tidbit: some nunneries believed that the Buddha's blessing clung to the ground beneath the yurt after a long stay, so when they moved, they left behind small offerings to keep the ground company. You help place one, a pebble wrapped in dyed wool topped with a single chicken feather. No explanation, just trust. Historians still argue whether this migration practice had a formal script or was passed down by instinct. Some old scrolls suggest a ritual of unmooring, but no copies have been found complete. Oral histories, though, abound. Each nun seems to have her own version filled with memories of windstorms, sacred mistakes, and one time someone left the butter effigy behind and had to race back on horseback before it melted into enlightenment. You help where you can, folding mats, herding the reluctant goats, who clearly have spiritual reservations about walking uphill, and learning how to tie a bundle of tea bowls so they don't clink loudly enough to wake the mountain spirits. The nuns laugh more today. It's the laughter of movement, of effort, of shared burdens. They tease one another gently. One insists her Thangka scroll has better posture than she does. Another curses the wind for stealing her prayer scarf again. When everything is packed, the yurt comes down in stages. The felt is peeled away like layers of history. The lattice frame creaks and sighs. By mid-morning, all that remains is a ring of flattened grass and the faint scent of incense. You stand at the edge of the empty circle, heart oddly full. The temple is gone, and yet not. You can still feel it, like a dream that lingers in your skin. Then the caravan begins. Nuns walk in loose lines, the cart pulled by a pair of goats with bell necklaces. The sacred objects ride in the center, protected by layers of wool and silence. You walk with them, boots crunching over frost-stiff grass, breath clouding the air like prayer smoke. They chant as they walk. Not always in unison, but close enough to feel like a wave you're drifting in. The sky stretches wide. The wind joins in. You start to understand that monastery doesn't have to mean stone or permanence. It can mean this: movement with meaning. You pass a stone cairn on a rise, a stupa built generations ago, now tilting slightly. The nuns pause. One places a sliver of cheese on the rocks. Another adds a piece of blue cloth. A whispered prayer. A short bow. Then onward. You ask if they ever stop for good, build something permanent. The oldest nun, walking at the back with a slow and steady gait, shakes her head. The world changes. We follow. Later you help set up the new site. It's a small plateau sheltered by a curve of hills. The view is absurdly serene, rolling grasses, distant snowcaps, and a stream that giggles like it knows secrets. The yurt goes up faster than you expect. Everyone knows their part. The altar is rebuilt. The butter statue re-emerges, slightly smooshed but spiritually intact. By sundown, the monastery is whole again. The prayers resume like nothing ever happened. And yet everything has shifted. The air is different. The stars have rearranged. You realize something. This isn't just about following grass and seasons. It's about never letting your spirit fossilize. The temple moves because your faith should too. As you fall asleep that night beneath a brand new roof that smells faintly of goat and sky, you hear one nun whisper in the dark, "Tomorrow the earth will hear us again." And somehow you believe her. The new morning arrives, wrapped in mist, curling and weaving like a soft scarf around the yurt's edges. You wake to the sound of quiet murmurs and the distant clatter of hooves. It's time for the day's most revered practice, the creation and blessing of prayer flags. You watch as the nuns unroll long strips of fabric dyed in earthy reds, deep blues, sun-kissed yellows, and fresh greens, the colors of earth, sky, fire, and water. Each strip is carefully cut into rectangles, their edges frayed, just so, to flutter with the wind. These flags are not mere decorations, they're prayers made visible. You're handed a piece and invited to paint a symbol on it, a swirling cloud, a sacred knot, or the ever-popular endless horse symbol, a tiny figure galloping endlessly across the fabric's length. You try your hand at the horse. It looks more like a squiggly dog, but the nuns smile kindly. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Prayer flags in Mongolian Buddhism were inspired by Tibetan traditions, but adapted for nomadic life. Unlike permanent structures, flags travel with the wind, spreading blessings and goodwill across the vast open steppe. They're changed, frequently worn down by weather and time, reflecting the impermanence central to Buddhist philosophy. And now for the quirky detail: some flags are sewn with tiny pockets containing crushed herbs or yak hair, believed to boost the prayer's potency. Others carry secret messages or protective spells, written in invisible ink made from melted butter and ash, though no one's quite sure how those work. Historians still debate whether the flag's origins predate Buddhism, with some scholars suggesting connections to ancient shamanic wind rituals. The idea of wind as messenger is a thread woven through many steppe cultures, making it tricky to assign flags to a single tradition. After painting, you join the nuns in chanting, their voices weaving around you like a warm breeze. The flags are then tied to a long rope stretched between two poles outside the yurt. As the wind picks up, the flags snap and flutter, sending prayers soaring into the wide blue sky. A younger nun leans close and whispers, "Each flag is a wish for a better tomorrow. For health, for peace, for strong horses." You look up, watching your crooked little horse wave wildly in the breeze, and feel strangely hopeful. The day unfolds with gentle tasks, mending robes, sorting herbs, and preparing simple meals. The pace is unhurried, deliberate, infused with purpose. You begin to understand that the flags are more than prayer. They're a bridge between earth and sky, between the visible and the unseen. As evening falls, the nuns gather once more, this time to remove the prayer flags. They carefully untie each one, folding them with reverence. Flags that have served their time are burned in a small fire, the smoke carrying final blessings into the dusk. You help carry the ashes back inside, laying them beside the altar. The smell of burning fabric and herbs mingles with the butter lamp's glow, creating an atmosphere thick with sacredness. That night you lie beneath the flickering light, the whispers of the day's prayers echoing in your mind. The steppe feels endless yet intimate, a vast canvas where every flag, every chant, every breath is a stroke of connection. And you know, somewhere out there, the wind is still carrying your prayers, riding like a pony across the endless grass. You awake to a sharp, sweet scent in the air, like pine needles crushed underfoot, mixed with something richer, almost honeyed. Outside the yurt flap, a small gathering has formed around a wooden table where several nuns carefully arrange piles of dried herbs, berries, and strange-looking roots. You're invited to join in, fingers learning the delicate art of sorting and combining these earthy ingredients. Today is the day of the traditional Mongol herbal medicine workshop, a blend of ritual knowledge and a pinch of magic. The nuns treat this practice as a sacred science passed down through generations, wrapped in layers of Buddhist mantra and nomadic intuition. You watch as one nun explains the properties of araksa, a bitter root said to calm the mind and strengthen the lungs. Another points to a cluster of bright red berries, warning that while helpful in small doses, they must be handled carefully to avoid illness. There's a casual seriousness here, a respect for nature's power that feels both grounding and humbling. Mainstream historical fact. Mongol Buddhist nuns often doubled as community healers, blending shamanistic herbal knowledge with Buddhist principles of compassion and balance. Their medicine wasn't just physical, but spiritual, aiming to heal body and soul simultaneously. And here's the quirky tidbit. One of the nuns swears that adding a pinch of crushed marmot fur to certain concoctions helps tune the remedy to the mountain's heart. No one's quite sure where the marmot fur idea originated, but it's been a tradition for as long as anyone can remember. You're relieved marmots aren't in today's recipe. Historians still debate the degree to which these herbal practices were systematized or improvised. Some suggest that much of the knowledge was oral, changing with the seasons and the whims of available plants, while others argue that manuscripts once existed, but were lost to time and nomadic life. As the sun climbs, you help prepare a steaming pot of tea brewed from pine needles and wild thyme, a bitter brew that clears your sinuses and makes your tongue tingle. The nuns smile knowingly when you grimace at the taste. Medicine first, comfort. Later, one jokes. The afternoon is devoted to lesson and reflection. You listen to stories of famous healers, women who journeyed across the steppe, curing illness and mediating between clans. You learn about the sacred healing chants believed to activate the medicine's power, turning simple herbs into vessels of divine energy. At one point, a nun draws a rough map in the dirt, tracing paths to distant mountains where rare herbs grow, places few outsiders ever see. She speaks reverently of these plants, describing their colors, scents, and even moods, as if they were living beings with personalities. By evening, you're invited to witness a healing ceremony performed for a fellow nun suffering from a lingering cough. The ritual combines chanting herbal poultices and smoke offerings, each element carefully balanced to restore harmony. You notice how the community gathers around, not in a clinical way but with shared concern and quiet faith. There's no rush, no demand for miracles, just patient presence. As night falls, you find yourself thinking about the connection between the healing herbs and the endless steppe, the way life here requires attentiveness, not just to people, but to the land, the wind, and the hidden rhythms of nature. And maybe, just maybe, that's the truest medicine of all. The chill of early morning wraps around you like a thick wool blanket as you rise to the distant sound of hooves and voices. Today is the day of a rare and deeply significant event, the ritual horse blessing. You watch the nuns prepare the horses with care that borders on reverence. Each animal is adorned with brightly colored ribbons and small charms made from carved bone and dyed wool. You're handed a handful of barley to scatter as an offering, and you try not to look too much like a tourist as you nervously approach the nearest horse. Mainstream historical fact. The horse occupies a sacred place in Mongol spirituality and daily life. For nomadic communities, horses were not just transportation, but companions and symbols of power and freedom. Buddhist rituals often incorporated horse blessings to protect these vital animals, and by extension the well-being of the community. One of the nuns explains that the blessing ritual is believed to strengthen the horse's spirit and shield it from harm, ensuring safe travels and resilience in harsh conditions. The ceremony includes chanting symbolic gestures and a careful sprinkling of sacred water mixed with herbs. Now for the quirky detail according to local legend. Some horses have been blessed so many times that they can sense the prayers even before the ceremony begins, neighing softly and stamping in rhythm with the chants. One particularly pampered mare is said to have fallen asleep during her own blessing, a phenomenon the nuns find amusing rather than disrespectful. Historians still argue whether these blessings were purely religious or also functioned as practical community events fostering social cohesion and psychological comfort in an uncertain environment. As the ceremony unfolds, you feel the solemnity in the air thick with incense and the rhythmic pounding of hooves on earth. The nuns chant steadily, their voices weaving an invisible net of protection around the horses. You reach out to stroke the neck of a large bay stallion, surprised by the warmth radiating from beneath his thick coat, despite the crisp air. The procession moves slowly across the steppe, a moving sanctuary of prayer and tradition. Along the way, the nuns pause at small cairns and sacred stones, offering prayers and tying scraps of cloth as blessings for the horses' continued safety. You notice that the horses seem calmer than usual, their eyes soft, their breaths steady. Even the youngest foal appears entranced, standing still as if understanding the gravity of the moment. After the ritual, the nuns invite you to share a simple meal of dried meat and fermented mare's milk. The taste is unfamiliar but oddly satisfying, a taste of the land and the lives entwined with it. As dusk falls, you sit by the fire with the nuns watching the stars emerge in the deepening sky. Someone hums a low tune about a legendary horse who outran the wind itself, a tale you know will be told again and again. You realize that here amidst the endless grass and boundless sky, the bond between humans and horses is not just practical, it's sacred, woven into the very fabric of existence. And as you close your eyes, you hear the faint echo of hoofbeats fading into the night, carrying the prayers of the steppe into the endless dark. The morning breaks with a whisper of wind threading through the yurt lattice, carrying the scent of dew and distant pine. You find yourself swept into a day filled with storytelling and oral tradition as rich and vital as the grass beneath your feet. The nuns gather in a circle, faces glowing with the soft light of dawn and shared memory. One elder begins her voice low and steady, recounting tales of legendary nuns who walked the steppe long before Buddhism arrived, women who spoke with wolves, rode storms, and healed broken spirits with nothing but their hands and fierce kindness. You lean in, captivated by the way her words paint the vast landscape, not just as a place, but as a living character, a partner in every story told. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're history, philosophy, and spiritual teaching woven into one seamless fabric. Mainstream historical fact. Oral storytelling was crucial among Mongol nomads, serving as a primary method for preserving history, law, and culture. Buddhist nuns adapted this tradition, incorporating parables, Jataka tales, and local legends to instruct and inspire. And here's your quirky detail. Some stories include impossible creatures like the firebird whose feathers glow even under the thickest snow, or the invisible horse that only appears to the pure of heart. One nun jokes that she once tried to ride the invisible horse, but ended up face down in a pile of yak dung. The group bursts into quiet laughter. Historians still debate how much these oral traditions influenced formal Buddhist teachings versus evolving independently. Some argue that the stories reflect a syncretism of shamanism and Buddhism unique to the Mongol steppe, while others see them as adaptations of broader Buddhist literature made local and personal. Later, you are invited to share a story of your own, something from your life, a memory, a dream. You fumble but find a tale about a windy night when your umbrella turned inside out and nearly flew away. The nuns listen intently, nodding, as if you've just told a parable about resilience. The day winds down with songs, ancient melodies with modern rhythms, voices rising and falling like the grass waves outside. You find yourself humming along, your voice growing steadier with each refrain. As dusk settles, you notice how storytelling binds the group together, a thread connecting past, present, and future, human and nature, spirit and earth. The steppe is alive with stories, and you are now part of that living tapestry. That night, under a canopy of stars, you dream not of horses or prayers, but of stories, endless weaving, carrying you across time and space on a gentle, unbroken breeze. The dawn greets you with a pale light filtering through the yurt's felt walls. Today is different. Today you are invited to participate in the communal weaving ritual, a practice both practical and deeply symbolic. You watch as the nuns unfurl skeins of hand-spun wool dyed in subtle shades, drawn from the steppe itself, muted browns, soft grays, and a surprising splash of sunset orange. The rhythm of the spinning wheel fills the yurt, a steady hum that feels like the heartbeat of this place. Each thread woven carries intention. Some are prayers for peace, others for protection, and a few are secret wishes whispered only to the loom. You're handed a shuttle and encouraged to try. Your first attempts are clumsy, the threads tangling and slipping through your fingers. But the nuns smile and offer gentle guidance. Mainstream historical fact: textile arts, especially weaving and embroidery, were vital skills among Mongol Buddhist communities. These crafts were not merely functional, but held spiritual significance, often used to create ritual garments, prayer flags, and talismans. The act of weaving was seen as a meditation, a way to bind the community together through shared labor and intention. Here's your quirky tidbit. There's a local legend that if you listen closely while weaving, you can hear the wool whispering stories from past lives. One nun swears she heard her own grandmother's voice urging her to slow down before a particularly tricky pattern. Historians still debate the extent to which these textile traditions were influenced by Tibetan Buddhism versus indigenous nomadic practices. Some scholars suggest a rich fusion with Buddhist symbolism, embroidered into traditional designs, creating a unique visual language of faith and identity. As the day unfolds, you participate in the weaving circle, sharing stories and laughter. The repetitive motion soothes your mind, weaving calm into your thoughts, much like the wool into fabric. By evening, the group displays their finished pieces, small rugs, prayer banners, and even a brightly colored sash meant to be worn during special ceremonies. Each item carries the fingerprints and prayers of its maker. You realize that in this simple act of weaving, the nuns sustain not just their community, but a centuries-old dialogue between spirit, land, and hand. That night, as you tuck yourself beneath your layered robes, you feel a new thread weaving through your own story, a connection you hadn't anticipated, but now can't imagine living without. You wake to a gentle hum in the air, like a breeze weaving through tall grass. Today feels quieter, deeper, like the final notes of a song you didn't realize had been playing all along. The nuns gather for their last shared meditation before your departure. No chants, no prayers, just breath and silence. You join them sitting cross-legged on the soft wool mats, feeling the rhythm of your heart sinking with the land beneath you. The room is bathed in the soft glow of morning light filtering through the felt walls, dust motes dancing lazily like tiny spirits. Outside, the steppe stretches infinitely, a vast breathing canvas of earth and sky. You think back on everything you've seen, the rituals, the migration, the songs, the laughter, the cold nights warmed by fire and friendship. The blend of discipline and flexibility of ancient tradition and everyday survival. The peace that comes not from absence of struggle, but from embracing it fully. Mainstream historical fact. Mongol Buddhist nunneries, though often remote and overlooked, played crucial roles in preserving spiritual life and cultural continuity through centuries of upheaval. Their peaceful existence amidst the harshness of the steppe is a testament to resilience and faith. And the quirky tidbit. Some nuns believe that when a visitor leaves, a small part of the monastery's spirit travels with them like a shadow, a prayer, or the scent of yak butter. So you're told not to be surprised if you find a stray prayer bead or a wisp of wool in your belongings when you return home. Historians still debate the degree to which these nunneries influenced broader Mongol Buddhist practice, often overshadowed by their male counterparts, yet undeniably vital to the spiritual fabric of the steppe. As the meditation ends, the nuns rise slowly, faces serene. One hands you a small bundle handmade, wrapped in faded cloth. Inside is a tiny carved horse, polished smooth by time and touch. "You carry this with you," she says softly, to remind you of the steppe's heart. You tuck the horse into your pocket, feeling its warmth seep into your palm. Outside, the wind sighs through the grasses, a gentle farewell. As you prepare to leave, you realize you're not just carrying souvenirs or stories. You're carrying a piece of something vast, something quiet but immense. The peaceful lives of Mongol nuns steadfast in the endless steppe. The night deepens and you settle in the quiet weight of your journey, pressing gently against your chest. The vast open steppe lies folded within your dreams, a place where wind whispers prayers, horses run free, and faith moves with the seasons. Breathe slowly now. Let the soft hum of the yurt's fire fade into the background. the gentle murmur of prayer settling like a lullaby around you. Know that the peace you've glimpsed here is not a distant legend, but a living, breathing reality. A quiet strength that whispers to you in the rustle of grass, the flicker of candlelight, and the steady rhythm of your own breath. Rest easy. The steppe watches over you now.